Business decisions are made by people. Commercial contracts are decided by people. Investments are decided by people. And all of these people, they need to build trust with each other. Otherwise, business is not going to happen.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility. All right, through this podcast, I am speaking with mission-driven entrepreneurs, investors, academics, the gamut of the ecosystem about the work they're doing to leverage the power of entrepreneurship and innovation against the big challenge that we face. And so this episode, I'm extremely excited to be joined by Renato Silva, who is the founder of Further Food and Ag, where he is working to help food and ag companies meet investors, partners, and customers to accelerate the growth of their business. He and I have had a number of conversations about the work he's doing there, really as a kind of a building a platform to these people all over Southeast Asia. And it's really great to have him here to talk about not just how he's built the platform, but also what he expects out of it and how he's trying to drive people further. So with that, Renato, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Rich. Really appreciate the opportunity. It's really nice to be chatting with you again.
All right, my man. So as we always do, who are you and what is the mission that you're on?
Sure. So I'm Renato Silva. I'm originally from Brazil. I've spent my career scaling businesses up in Latin America, Europe, Asia. I've been in Asia for nearly 20 years now, on and off. And my mission right now is to help accelerate capital and strategic partnerships into sustainable food and ag solutions as a way to contribute to solutions to climate change.
What drew you to this? Because you were a corporate guy who was scaling up other companies. Now you're trying to be an entrepreneur, scaling up not only others, but your own. So what drew you to the space itself, like climate and food? And then what drew you into being an entrepreneur on your own?
That's a great question. I grew up in Brazil, very close to nature. I spent my childhood in nature. I was always mesmerized about it, but also about the destruction of nature, as I later saw, not just in Brazil, but everywhere I went in the world. I saw that over the past 30 to 40 years. So that was always something that was striking me very hard. For the later part of my career, I was working in tech, scaling businesses very quickly. My latest corporate venture was Tencent, one of the largest tech companies in China. I spent 8 years working with them. And after my daughter was born in 2017, at the height of COVID, like many of us, I was questioning myself, okay, what do I do next, right? What do I leave for my daughter? The planet is not looking that great. I started researching a little bit and I stumbled upon climate change, which was that distant thing for me. But I started researching a little bit more to try to figure out what that was. I came to comprehend that this is the largest challenge humanity had ever faced. And I thought, wow, okay, so that's a thing that I would love to give it a go, right? I would love to spend some time trying to understand how to bring solutions to. And I thought I had spent my career scaling businesses up, and I thought I could do basically the same thing, scaling positive businesses up. At that time, I came to understand that basically 80% of the solutions already exist. We just need to scale them up. And I said, voila, that's what I've been doing my whole life. So why not? And then I went down the rabbit hole, and 4 years later, I am.
All right. So was there a specific moment that you said, all right, I'm done at 10 cent, I'm done making so much money and having these stock options. I'm gonna go and be an entrepreneur? Or was it just kind of a slow boil until you're just like, no, now's the time. I feel good. Everything's in place and let's go.
I think it was a slow decision, through my researches, through questioning life, through looking at my daughter growing up and the world we're leaving for her generation and the next ones. And it was basically a slow process to get to the point where I said, well, this is worthwhile dedicating myself to. There is also a business opportunity, so it's not all philanthropic, right? It's not okay, I'm going to leave my corporate job and dedicate the rest of my life to be financially miserable because I want these solutions. No, it was like, okay, there is an opportunity to do good and to earn a living doing that. And I said, why not? Right? This is the right time. So that's what brought me to embarking on this journey.
Awesome. All right. So then what on this journey, or I guess as you're thinking about it, What led you to believe that entrepreneurs play such an important part, or that you want to be working with entrepreneurs as kind of your mode for addressing climate changes?
I think because I was working in tech for so long, I was already very exposed to the entrepreneurial community, both at Tencent and in my earlier roles back in Brazil. I was always either joining entrepreneurial, events, accelerators. I was coaching some startups myself. So I was very comfortable with that environment. Also, when I was working for Tencent in Bangkok, I was running a chapter for Thailand for one of the largest product and entrepreneurial meetups in the world. So I was very much involved in that environment. And for me, it was just a natural progression to kind of go and work with entrepreneurs. But at the same time, I always think that climate change has been largely driven by large companies. And these companies have started with entrepreneurs themselves, right? They have had a similar journey. And we can't really talk about climate solutions only working with startups. The startups are super important. Entrepreneurs are very important from many perspectives, but we also need to look into the larger companies and how to engage them and how to support them on their transition to a more sustainable and resilient way of working.
Now, when you got started, what was your process for bringing together this new organization? And I mean, you had ties to the entrepreneur community, but did you already have ties to the sustainability community, the climate community, or did you spend some time kind of building that and figuring out like how your community would fit in, supplement, replace, to drive further towards your vision?
It's very easy to look back and, trace the dots. So looking back now, yeah, it all makes a lot of sense. But when I was working in the midst of it or trying to discover what would be next, how I could add value, right? I always think about additionality. I always think about how can I go into a new environment, a new sector, a new company and actually add value. So what happened to me was when I left Tencent back in 2022, I was in Bangkok. My wife was also Brazilian, and I were thinking, okay, what's next? Where do we go? And then we stumbled across the Green School in Bali, which is a pioneering sustainability school for kids. Our daughter was back then 5 years old, and we were like, well, if we're going down this path of sustainability, it makes sense that she goes to an environment that is conducive to that as well, right? So we decided to go to Bali and enroll our daughter in the Green School. We had an incredible time there, both her at the school learning loads of sustainability related things, but also ourselves in connecting with that community, which is also very entrepreneurial community. So um, while I was still in Bangkok before moving to Bali, taking her to the Green School, I also did Terra.do, which is a 3 month long fellowship program helping people in conventional industries kind of figure out how to apply their skills and experiences into climate. So I did that. It was extremely helpful. It was an amazing experience. I finally understood the science behind climate change, but also how to apply my skills and experiences to the solutions. And there I met a couple of people that were in Asia as well. Two of them were in Bali. So when I got here, we got together and we were like, what do we do next? So we knew there was a strong sustainability community in Bali. And we said, let's go and meet them at events, at meetups. We looked for events, we looked for meetups, and there was nothing really happening on a regular basis. And because I had been doing this product meetup, tech meetup in Bangkok for many years, I said, well, why don't we do our own? And that's how Scale Climate Action was born. We decided to bring in um, the type of speed and scale that we have in tech. How do we apply that to sustainable solutions? So we brought in the entrepreneurial climate slash sustainability community together with us to discuss how do we scale those things up. And what we did at Scale Climate Action was we highlighted entrepreneurs and investors that were working on sustainable solutions in Indonesia or across the region, but were passing by Bali. And this became a very, very powerful, uh, reunion of people who kind of knew each other, but had never met, and a bunch of new people that had never met. And that was very empowering, and the energy in the room was really interesting because we were listening and trying to inspire other people to take climate action through their businesses by listening to actual entrepreneurs and investors that were in the space. And everyone was trying to help each other and trying to figure out ways to scale the solutions that were being discussed. It was very powerful to see all these people in the room. We were supposed to do 3 to 4 events, and because of the feedback and the demand, and people asking for more of these events, we ended up doing 19 of those events. 1,300 people coming to our events. These were free events, but they were very interesting because it was not just a networking event. It was just not just a meetup. It was really getting entrepreneurs, investors, and operators across climate solutions to come and share what they were doing in order to inspire more people to take action through their businesses. And eventually, we also saw that food and agriculture was coming back again and again as one of the causes, one of the major causes of climate change. Globally, our food systems are responsible for roughly a third of greenhouse gas emissions, but not just we were not just looking at the cause, but we were looking at the solutions that are already available and scaling up. So my co-founders and I, we fell in love with the food and agriculture space, especially because in Asia Pacific, it is a very complex space. It's incredibly underfunded. And we said, well, if it's incredibly underfunded, population is estimated to grow very quickly. It's one of the fastest growing populations across the world. We need to feed these people. And if we continue producing food the same way that we are today, the problem is only going to get bigger. So we need more solutions in the space. Then when we look
Sorry, let
into,
me cut you off. Let me cut you off.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
Going back to your events, these events, what do they look like? Because you were mentioning that you went from 3 to 19, that you were seeing more investments come through. I mean, when I think of events, I think of couple hours, start with maybe a half an hour of drinks and some nibbles, and then 1 to 3 people speak, and then there's a bit of networking after. Was that your style of event? Was that all it took to get people started, or did you have a different approach to these events?
No, I think the first 19 events were pretty standard. So we would I think what kind of drew people's attention was the story, right? The story was, can we take tech proven frameworks to, for speed and scale and apply to this solution in food and agriculture? And then let's discuss about this live with the audience, right? So we would bring an entrepreneur that is working on that. The entrepreneur would give a 10 to 15-minute talk, and then we would start debating between, Q&A, audience, ourselves, and so on. The latest model, we went through different iterations, and the latest model that we thought worked very well was bringing 2 to 3 entrepreneurs slash investors in the same conversation, talking about the same thematic, and then creating a panel discussion after the presentations where this became a global debate with everyone that was in there. And it worked very well, and everybody was very happy. Our shortest event, I think, took 2 hours, the longest 3.5 hour, which I think was our first event, which was nice because the room was full throughout the 3.5 hours, but at the end, everybody was kind of exhausted, right? So, and after the panel discussions, we would then, of course, have a networking session and people exchanging.
Okay, so you run these 19. Were they all the same topic? Was it all tech and climate change? Or did you find that over time people started saying, hey, we want to know more about, energy, or more about food, or more about mobility? Like what do people kind of gravitate towards? And when they did you find it was getting more and more, say, localized in the approach? Because I feel like a lot of times these events are very global, hyperbolic, world ending, there's hope, let's do something. But when I get to like the more local, regional conversations, it can be very specific to that country, to that community, to that region. And so a lot more traction's happening there. So how did you balance, say, the themes, and then how did you balance, say, the level of approach?
So, um, that's a very good question. there wasn't a deliberate, theme balancing act on our side. We had five themes that we wanted to cover. They were, I think, roughly based on John Doerr's Speed and Scale book. Uh, one industry, the other one food and agriculture, and so forth. So we started covering that, and I think the tech angle to it was to sort of tell people where myself and my co-founders, who all came from tech, were bringing to the table. But I think that narrative sort of dissipated after the first three events when we sort of convinced people, hey, we're here, to figure out how to speed and scale these solutions up. And we didn't need to use that anymore because people were coming back naturally, right? So then we started looking more into what are the solutions that we see on the ground that are very interesting for more people to know which of these solutions or entrepreneurs themselves can actually inspire more of our audience to take, picks and shovels and go and build something themselves or change the way that they work in their own companies. So I think it came from a thesis that we had, and naturally it gravitated towards the solutions on the ground that can inspire the most people to take action. And a lot of these solutions were very localized, of course, because we were talking directly to entrepreneurs, but the I guess my role as the main MC of these events was always to talk to the entrepreneurs beforehand. So we always would meet beforehand and discuss about, how they see their work and, climate change in general and so on. And my point to all of them was always, how can we take what you're doing right now and scale this across Indonesia, but then across the region and even globally, right? And try to help them envision that if they hadn't envisioned that. And many of them were also scared, like, oh, I don't want to grow beyond Indonesia. I don't want to grow beyond Southeast Asia. And I'm like, okay, no problem. But how can we enable other people in other parts of Southeast Asia or other parts of the world to look at you as an inspiration or as a blueprint and use that to scale your solution in other parts of the world? So we always tries to bring that, and I think this was an interesting discussion that we always had and still resonates today.
Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit maybe controversial here and ask you, like, what was the standard profile for the people who say they weren't sure how to scale out of Indonesia across the region, and what was stereotypically the profile of those who were like building specifically for that and saw then going to global? Like, did you find that more local Indonesians or Filipinos or whatever, like they're like more like, I'm just trying to solve this and that's all as far as I can get, and the Westerners in the region are like, no, we're gonna go global? Like, what were you seeing? Because I feel like I see that regularly as well, and we can talk about the challenges that they face. And I'm also wondering, like, from the perspective of the individual, who was it that you were talking to, and maybe some stereotypically, like, what was preventing them from seeing the bigger picture, from seeing the scale that you thought was required, or through those conversations?
I think there's a bit of that, a bit of locals across Asia Pacific, depending on the country, looking more into their domestic markets. And I think it has to do with the size of the country, right? So if we take Indonesia, for example, it's a very large market. So Indonesians, in theory, don't need to go outside. If they solve a specific solution for Indonesia, they're good, right? And a similar thing we can see in China, in India, in my home country, Brazil, right? Why do, entrepreneurs a lot of times ask themselves, why do I need to deal with customs, with other countries' regulations, with taxes, with whatever it is, if I have a big enough of a market already to tackle? So I think that's one part of it. The other part that I saw was also uh, you have biologists, scientists with fantastic solutions on the ground, but not necessarily knowing how to market that, right? Not necessarily knowing how to go to market, how to tell a story to investors that actually makes a lot more sense and makes their companies more investable. So I see a lot of that. Um, and I see that not just in Indonesia, but across Southeast Asia. And I think there is a very clear need for accelerator type programs that could take some of these companies and help them level up and become more investable. The big question, there are two big questions in that front. First, who funds these accelerators, which I think is always complex and not everybody is willing to fund. I'm not saying an accelerator is a solution, but some sort of type of support for companies in that kind of level. A lot of them die before having a chance to play, right? Because it's just rough for these people. So, the first question is who funds an accelerator type program? But the second question is how can we get thousands of accelerators or accelerator-like programs to support hundreds of thousands of companies at the same time to have a chance. And it's not just supporting the companies, it's supporting the solutions that we desperately need. So I don't have the answer to these two questions, but these are questions that are often on my mind.
I mean, they open up an interesting question, which is like, why do we need so many? I mean, Silicon Valley doesn't need thousands of accelerators. We need thousands of accelerators to drive all these technologies. Like, is it that the accelerator, or maybe is it even that the accelerator model is kind of broken in this context? And I've been looking at this for years in the sense of, if you're going to build, say, a food delivery app versus, say, something that's more climate oriented, you can move the food delivery app pretty quick to market, where the climate delivery one might be a longer burn, which means your acceleration process just naturally for it to succeed has to be longer. But for the funders, that is probably the pain that you were mentioning, right? Like I found few accelerators that are willing to do more than 6 months or 9 months. I found one last month is willing to do 18, but the last kind of 12 months is very virtual. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, that model is kind of broken. It doesn't really support growth. But that also gets into the idea, like, if you're in Indonesia, what support would you need as well from others in the ecosystem? Like beyond the accelerator, how big is that support group?
So I think there are a couple of things at play here. So let's go back to Silicon Valley, right? And accelerates the number of accelerators. And I think it's not the number of accelerators that matter most here, but let's look at the overall ecosystem, right? So you have in Silicon Valley fantastic universities, right? Supported by very good schools. So entrepreneurs already come from a very high level of entrepreneurship and knowledge and study that makes it super easy or easier for accelerators to exist. And they're hyper focused on software, which is a very different beast than when you're dealing with climate or food and agriculture, which you rely on biology and, hardware, a lot of different things. So I think the whole ecosystem in the US has been built over hundreds of years to become what it is today. When we come to Southeast Asia or Asia Pacific more broadly, that ecosystem doesn't exist, right? Or has not existed for hundreds of years. You do have some strong universities in some areas, but are they really pushing for entrepreneurship? Not really sure, right? So you get people coming out of these universities that are not business ready, that will take some time to be out there in the field working for large, small, medium companies to sort of get that business experience. And then when they venture out themselves. So it's a much slower process. And then let's look into Southeast Asia with how many languages we have here, how many countries, right? So this all plays into the complexity. When I'm talking about a accelerator model, I'm not saying accelerators are really helpful and really work, but an accelerator like program, maybe we should call it business school for grown-ups, business school for entrepreneurs. That would help accelerate that knowledge gap that I think is present in many, many countries, including my own Brazil. I think Brazil has made very big steps into closing that gap, especially in the private sector. So there are different routes right now. The entrepreneurial ecosystem in Brazil is very strong. So it's different. And in Asia Pacific, I think we're still figuring out where the funding is going to come from, right? Because I don't think it is coming from governments and then investors. Well, why would I invest on this? What's really the return for me? So I think we're still trying to find what to do. And
Yeah. So getting into the investment side of this, what are you currently seeing in terms of the market? I know that we're in a special moment again because of another big macroeconomic thing happening in the world again, but in general, like what are you seeing in terms of the funding ecosystem right now? Are deals being made? is that dry powder getting a little bit, closer to being put to use? Because you talk to a lot of investors, you're also talking to entrepreneurs, like where are we in the ecosystem or in the cycle? Are you seeing more deals? They're smaller, they're bigger, they're more like how are people de-risk? Because I'm curious, like in the kind of the idea of we need more dollars coming into these entrepreneurs. Are there opportunities now for that to happen? I mean, we're in a big moment right now, but is it in the startup sector? Is it kind of that middle group, or is everyone just waiting for everyone to make their way through the valley of death before they put their dry powder to use?
It's all of the above. It depends on
So
who
there's
you're
hope for
talking.
everybody.
There's hope for everybody, right? I think the bottom line is there is less money available right now. Um, a lot of the capital that was coming into food and agriculture, blue economy, circular economy, has now made its way into AI. So AI is basically sucking up all 90% of the capital in the world right now. So it has made things harder for most people. However, the companies that have been able to prove commercial traction, maturity, have been able to grow despite the adversities, these companies are actually attracting bigger rounds because first, they have de-risked a large chunk of the business. They have proven to investors that they are here to stay and they're here to grow their business and grow investors' capital. They also have the maturity that is required to grow, to go through adversities, and the sort of venture, more generalist investors are out of the space, right? So the ones who stayed are the ones who really know the space very deeply, who really understand what could work, what could not work, really understand the companies that are in there, have known these companies that are now at later stage for many, many years. So their conviction is also stronger. So for these companies, they are finding a way to raise capital, which is positive. But for the vast majority, they are not as investable as current investors are looking for. Investors in general, of course, there are exceptions, but in general, are not really looking for super early stage anymore because this is risky right now, right? They're looking for more later stage, starting Series A and onwards, which means companies have largely de-risked a big chunk of the business. That's how I see it right now.
I'm going to bring you back to the event that you just ran, because you just had an event, I guess, about not even a month ago, where you brought together a number of investors and entrepreneurs, going against the grain at a time when investment is not moving too much. But you brought together a number of people. I saw the post that you'd made. It sounded like everything went really well. It'd be great. One, introduce the actual event and the platform itself, and then also talk a little about how you designed that event, because I think a lot of times like we just try and get people in the room and okay, magic will happen. But you spend a lot of time talking with people, trying to make sure that they're the right people. So I'm curious, like one a little bit about the event, what it is, and then how do you approach the design of the event to make sure that you have the most so you have the greatest chance for something magical to happen.
The reason why we did this event in Singapore, which is called Further. So Further came out of the first wave of events, the 19 events that we did, Scale Climate Action and so on. And back then we were seeing food and agriculture coming back again and again as a big topic. So one of my co-founders and I decided to focus on food and agriculture, and that's how Further was born, right? We wanted to take a deeper look into food, agriculture, blue economy, circular economy across Asia Pacific because of these complexities that I talked about. We thought, okay, it's complex. There are people building amazing things. There is opportunity in here, and we feel that this is a field we could impact. So when we decided to build Further, we had already seen the power of connections in this field, the power of getting entrepreneurs together with other entrepreneurs, but also with investors. We started seeing this movement happening in our first series of events, and we decided to bring this to a bigger audience. One of our co-founders, Toby, he had been doing one-to-one matchmaking for nearly 15 years across different industries, has been very successful. So basically, we brought the community and the validation that we were having through Scale Climate Action combined with Toby's expertise, and we created further. So we said, what if we bring this event to a capital hub, which Singapore was a natural next step, and we then bring in investors, corporates, and entrepreneurs that are building across our food systems and bring them together for one-to-one, pre-arranged one-to-one meetings based on their needs, based on what they're looking for, so that we cut most of the noise when you go to an event, right? When you go to a big conference, you go hoping to meet some of the people that you would be looking for. Sometimes you don't even know who you would be looking for, or there will be a bunch of people working in similar stuff as you, or investors that are investing across the food systems, and you want to approach that investor, but then 30 seconds into the conversation, you realize, oh, actually, we don't have much alignment, right? So what we were trying to do with Further was really to cut 80% of that noise and bring people to one-to-one conversations, making sure that they were at least slightly aligned, right? That they were at least working on similar stuff, had similar interests. We're looking for similar check sizes. We're looking for similar projects. And because that would enable the conversation to be much more interesting and useful for both sides and help our mission, which is to accelerate capital and strategic partnerships into our food systems. So the way we design this is um, we go out looking for companies that would be fitting to what most of the investors we have been talking to are looking for. Like I mentioned before, later stage companies at this moment in time, right? In certain sectors, in certain things. So because of Scale Climate Action, we build a very strong network of companies and investors across Asia Pacific. We regularly meet with most of them. Um, so we have very clear signals, especially from the investor side. And then we start looking for companies that fit those signals, right? And that's how we build our initial target list for companies that we want to bring into the event. And then we start collecting data from both sides. We collect data on what investors are looking for, their ticket size, what stage of companies they're looking for. We then go back to the other side and the same thing, and we start a huge outreach effort that takes months to complete. And we started telling people, hey, this is what we do. This is what we're actually going to build. This is what's happening. This is who's going to be in the room. This is who's already confirmed. And as we get the confirmations, we then start working a little deeper into matchmaking, right? So because we talk to most people that are coming to the event before the event happens, we actually know not just the data that they're providing us, but we know different nuances, right? Their ticket size may say this, their interest may say that, but they also tell us a whole bunch of other things that tags are not able to get. So uh, we do pride ourselves in doing a lot of the matching manually, and we think that that's where the value actually is. So we pre-arrange those meetings. When people come to the event, they already know who they're going to meet, when they're going to meet them, at what table they're going to meet. And obviously, during the event, we do this live as well, right? Some meetings drop and we help people to connect to each other. Other new people show up at the event that were not planned. And then we very, very actively work on those matches.
Now, in advance of that, I'm also curious, are you doing any briefs or profiles, bios in advance so that, like, say I'm an entrepreneur, I can learn a little bit more about that investor? Or do I have, like, say, 2 weeks noticing I'm going to meet with these investors? I should go do my own homework. Like, I'm curious how you do that.
Yes. So about 2 weeks before the event, we open up what we call our matchmaking platform, where everybody has access to everybody. So everyone who registered to the event can go in and either build their profile or research more on the people they are actually going to meet with. And that's essentially what people do. We dream of the day that we can actually bring the profiles already to everybody and build the profiles to everybody. But unfortunately, this requires people to confirm that they're coming to the event much earlier, which doesn't really happen, right? So the day we're able to get people to confirm earlier, then we can actually do a lot more things.
Yeah, no, I asked that because I used to do that for my lunches and for my events, and I didn't have people who I was trying to matchmake per se, but I would bring in say 20 to 25 people in different cities around the region, and we'd have a lunch or an evening together, and I would make sure that everyone's like I'd send a pre-read for everybody, and I even did this for my larger events as well, and I have basically a pre-read with all the bios of people, and I have like two or three questions maybe for some of the events that they would then answer, and I can see where you could probably do that online pretty quickly where you have a form that says, okay, you're confirmed and please answer these questions to basically, without this, we won't, be able to position you very well. And maybe over time you get better at this and more people just want to have it in there anyway. But, you have like some standard questions for them. And then you can actually, through the system, say who has access to that profile, being the people that you match them to.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. For the
So
next one.
interesting stuff. Okay. Beyond that, were there any kind of specific things that you look at to like say in process or mechanisms for the discussion? Is it like a 15-minute or 30-minute? Like what kind of little things have you realized kind of improves the likelihood of successful matches or successful conversations, or say in 1 week, 3 months, 9 months, an actual investment?
So that's a very good question. I think what really enables um, conversations to continue is really figuring out alignment, right? So the quicker we can get people to align with each other, uh, the higher the probability of a successful outcome down the road, be it a commercial deal being done, be it further introductions, be it investments being done. And I think that's the power of getting people face to face, right? Because everyone can research today, especially with LLMs. It's very easy, very quickly. You can research and figure out, who are the top 10 investors or corporates in specific field or startups or whatever it is, right? But making sure that you're meeting face to face so that you can build rapport, you can actually understand whether you would want to do business with that person or not. But not just meeting anyone, but making sure that people are um, basically aligned on the direction they're looking for, on the types of businesses that they're looking for, on the types of things that they are working on. I think that's what resonates the most, and that's what helps the most for people to continue those discussions down the road.
Yeah. Well, I also think honestly, and I don't know how many you've run like this, but the more that you run, the more conversations that you have, your filter for who you let in the room also gets tighter, which should then make the matchmaking process even easier. And I feel like that's also a mechanism for creating this community, is like your own filter as you're going through this gets smarter, your own AI, right? And so you can say, actually, this investor's looking for this. Oh, I already know these five companies, and you've talked to them for so many times. You're like, look, I haven't done due diligence on them, but through my conversations, I know that you should talk to these five, right? Like these are the five that out of the 50 I've talked to in the space, probably the most aligned to you, or the ones that I would trust to take to the next step, or wouldn't be a waste of your time, whatever it might be.
Yep, yep, 100%.
Right. So it's like everything's getting a little bit easier over time. All right. So with that, like, what are some of your key takeaways from this experience? I mean, you're not just building this, and I mean, I might have this wrong, but SCA was a group that then was offline, then went to WhatsApp, then became another offline event through these like you've built multiple communities. I think every single event, the WhatsApp group, and then obviously the matchmaking, like these are very specific communities, and they've got their own energy, their own power. What have you learned through building them, creating them, trying to constantly maintain the energy of them as you've done this? I feel like a lot of people are trying to build communities. I think we need more people doing this work over time, across the region, across all industries. What are some things that you've learned through this process of kind of building, curating, and matchmaking that would help other community-minded, entrepreneurs or those who want to build a community get a little bit further?
Well, the first thing is what I had always had in my earlier career, which is you have to build something that people find valuable. It has to create additionality, right? I think we were talking about this in the beginning. Um, I don't want to build something that the market doesn't want or doesn't need. So listening to that is very, very important. And I think we are also going always through that process, always trying to understand, okay, what does the market really need? What does the market want? How can we add value to this? Because we are working on something that is way bigger than any one of us, which is we're working towards climate solutions, right? So how do we add value to that? I could have started a company myself for one specific product or service or solution to the climate crisis, but then I also thought, well, then I'll be creating this one solution when actually there are already a wealth of solutions out there that just need a little more support to actually be able to make it. So I decided to go on that route, right? To take everyone that's already doing something and add value to that. So I think additionality and adding value is a big thing. Another big learning is on the power of human connections. Because I guess I was working in tech for so long with like very large scale in terms of numbers of users and anything. And I always was proud of myself and my teams for always talking to customers, always interviewing customers, and always figuring out what resonated, what didn't, and trying to figure out ways to create better products and create better experiences and outcomes. And I think that power of human connection is so important in any type of business, especially when we're working on solutions that are way bigger than ourselves, right? AI is here. It is definitely a very useful tool, but I don't think it will replace the human connection anytime soon, right? Uh, Business decisions are made by people. Uh, Commercial contracts are decided by people. Investments are decided by people. Solutions on the ground and the execution of that are decided by people, at least for now. Uh, and all of these people, they need to build trust with each other. Otherwise, business is not going to happen, right? And how do we build trust? We build trust by looking to people in the eyes and having a conversation. And that's what further is about, right? Is about making sure that people are meeting face to face in a proper setting that is made for that, that is conducive to that type of conversation, making sure that the people that are meeting have very aligned purposes in terms of business goals or interests or whatever it is, and that they can very highly find the conversation useful and continue that conversation down the road. So I think these two things are two of the strongest learnings that I had. I thought before we started further, I honestly thought that people were covered or entrepreneurs were covered in terms of contacts with investors, and investors already knew everybody in the ecosystem and they didn't need this kind of matchmaking. But once we started really talking to the market about this and trying to understand these more deeply, we saw there's an interesting opportunity to make that happen.
Sir, I totally agree with you. I've got one last question for you because I would ask you how do you remain optimistic, but it's very clear that you can't be taken out. Like you can't be nailed down. It's fine. It's good. You're energized by the people you're working with on your mission, and you got a gigantic smile. So you're fully glass full, overloaded. It's great. But I'm curious, the next 5 years, where do you see yourself going? What are you hoping to build, enable, catalyze? What's the scale or the reference that you have for yourself and for the work that you're doing?
That's a very good question, and sometimes difficult to grasp because we're working on a day-to-day, uh, basis. But I think what I want for further is that it plays a very significant role in accelerating capital and strategic partnerships across our food systems, not just in Asia Pacific, but globally. I think Asia Pacific is just the starting point, and there are very interesting challenges to work on and people to support. And I've been in the region for nearly 20 years, so it's definitely my second home. But what I want for further is that we are able to replicate the impact that we have here around the world. Um, I'm looking at very large scale of capital accelerated into the space, at least 100 million US dollars for the next 5 years. If we're able to accelerate and catalyze that kind of flow into the space, we are having a little bit bigger drop in the ocean. Um, and hopefully we can also enable other ecosystem players to do a similar kind of thing.
What are two or three things you think that, if it happens, it makes your life a lot easier to get to that $100 million goal or to the goals that you've set?
So I think one of them is for investors of all kinds, capital providers of all kinds, to start looking more seriously, not just into startups, scale ups, and how they can enable sustainable solutions, but also look further into working with larger corporations and enabling the financing of sustainable solutions inside those large corporations. If we look into climate change, it's mainly driven by big businesses, right? So how do we engage those big businesses to make sure that doing the right thing is also good for the bottom line? And I think capital plays a very, very significant role in that, right? So figuring out ways to enable sustainable solutions on the large companies, on large scales, to be financed, to be good for the bottom line. So that's one thing. And that's a sector where further is starting to look into and starting to work towards too. We want to engage more of the larger companies to help them become more sustainable by, increasing their bottom lines. So that is one thing. The second thing would be for a lot of the capital that is sitting on investors right now to be deployed. I wouldn't say more loosely, but faster into the entrepreneurs that are on the ground right now. Uh, I see incredible entrepreneurs doing incredible work, but still finding it very challenging to um, capture that capital. Some people are speaking to 50, some people to 100 investors over the course of a year uh, before they're able to make meaningful progress with potential investors. Obviously, that's where further comes in to help cut the 50 to 100 meetings into 5, 10 meetings that are really, really meaningful. So, investors being faster at deployment is something that is very, very important. So again, working on the big front and on the smaller front, I think are two very, very important things. And the third, I would say, we as a civilization, as a society, need to figure out how to really leverage AI to the betterment of the economy, of biology, of our ecosystems, of our food production, that this may be a serious evolution in human history that leverages this technology to do the right things that we need. It has the potential, it has the power to do that. And I hope that within the next 5 years, we figure it out, at least for our food systems. And we take a huge leap where we start producing more food, more sustainably for more people, but also taking the people who are responsible for the food systems production right now to leverage or to level up their game instead of being miserable as most food producers in the developing world actually are right now, right? We all eat in the developing world Um, or in the developed world, people eat 3 to 5 times a day and hopefully are expecting prices to keep the same. But how do we do that when the people who are actually producing it are really struggling to barely stay alive? So I think if we figure out how to, enable these three things in the next 5 years, I would say mission accomplished, at least for now, and then we look for another one.